Most wedding photographers and videographers are underpricing themselves. Not because they're bad, not because they lack skill, not because the market won't pay more, but because they don't understand the math of what they're actually selling. And once you understand the math, it becomes very hard to justify low pricing because the market isn't the problem. The problem is how your work is positioned. So let's break it down. Most photographers and videographers think that they're selling photos or films, but they're not. You're selling the only permanent record of one of the most important days of someone's life. Think about it. The dress is worn once, the cake's eaten, the flowers die, the music stops, the venue resets for another event the next day. Every vendor delivers something temporary except for one: photo and video. They're the only things that last. They're the only things that preserve the experience. They're the only things that allow someone to relive the moment decades later. But still, photographers and videographers price themselves like they're delivering something that's disposable. So let's look at the math. Let's say a couple looks at their wedding photos or videos 10 times a year. It might be anniversaries, family gatherings, showing the photos to friends, sharing them with their kids someday. Now, stretch that across 30 years. 10 viewings a year times 30 years is 300 experiences. That means 300 times that they revisit their wedding day. Now imagine you charge $3,000 for that wedding. 3,000 divided by 300 experiences is $10 per experience. $10. That's less than a movie ticket now. Now let's double the price. At $6,000, that's $20 per experience. It's still less than most people will spend on dinner out. So that's not that expensive. It's dramatically undervalued. And this is where most wedding creatives miss the point. They price their work based on hours worked, but couples value it based on lifetime meaning. That disconnect is where underpricing begins. The second thing to consider is emotional significance. Weddings aren't casual purchases. They're emotionally charged, high meaning events. This is one of the biggest financial decisions that a person will make in their lives. People will spend enormous amounts of money on a single day. $15,000 or $20,000 on a venue, $10,000 on catering, $5,000 or $10,000 on florals, $8,000 on a band, $3,000 on lighting, $2,000 on stationery, and then they'll try and negotiate photo or video down from $3,000 to $2,500. Why? Because most creatives accidentally position themselves as vendors instead of anchors. Here's what I mean. The venue feels important, the dress feels important, the flowers feel important, but photo or video feels like documentation, and documentation is replaceable, but memory preservation isn't. If the venue costs $15,000 and you cost $2,500, you're not positioned as a premium decision. You're positioned as just background noise, and that always gets price shopped. Couples negotiate the things that they feel are replaceable. They don't negotiate the things that they emotionally anchor to. So your job is to position your work as essential to their experience, not optional. So let's talk about percentages, because the wedding industry has a very interesting spending pattern. The average wedding budget in a lot of markets today sits somewhere between $30,000 and $60,000 for a mid-market wedding. Let's call it $40,000 for simplicity. So if a couple spends $40,000 total and you charge $3,000, that means photo or video represents about 7.5% of the total budget. 7% for the only permanent asset of their wedding day. But the venue is representing like 35%, catering's at like 25%, decor is another 10 or 15%. Photo and video often sit under 10%, and that distribution makes no logical sense, but it exists because people continue to reinforce it. Every time someone says affordable wedding photography or budget-friendly packages starting at only $2,000, they train the market to think that photography or videography is a small percentage purchase. And that's not a market problem, that's a positioning problem. When creatives position themselves as affordable, the market treats them accordingly. But when creatives position themselves as premium, the percentage shifts. Now let's zoom out and look at the business side, because this is where underpricing becomes dangerous. Let's say you charge $2,500 a wedding and you shoot 30 weddings in a year. That's $75,000 in revenue, and that might sound okay until you realize what it requires. 30 weekends gone, hundreds of hours of editing, constant communication, travel, admin work. Now, imagine trying to double that income. If you want to hit 150,000 at 2,500 a wedding, you would need 60 weddings. That is physically impossible without burning out. But now look at a different structure. Charge $6,000, shoot 20 weddings, and that gives you 120,000 a year. Same calendar, half the stress, more margin, and more breathing room. Underpricing yourself forces volume. Volume creates exhaustion, and exhaustion limits growth. This is why so many photographers and videographers burn out around year 3 or 4, not because they stopped loving their work, but because the math eventually catches up to them. Now, here's the uncomfortable truth. Most photographers and videographers underprice themselves because they're afraid. They're afraid that no one will book, they're afraid of losing inquiries, and they're afraid of hearing the words, "you're too expensive." But here's what actually happens when you price too low. You attract price-sensitive clients. Price-sensitive clients compare more, negotiate more, request more, question more, and those clients often require the most energy. So you end up working harder for less money, and underpricing doesn't protect you, it traps you. Because when you stay cheap for too long, the market associates your brand with affordability, and once that identity is set, it's so much harder for you to raise your prices later. So let's clarify something. Premium positioning doesn't mean arrogance. It doesn't mean pretending you're better than everyone else. It just means being clear. Clear about who you serve, what you deliver, how you deliver it, and why it matters. Premium brands always communicate 4 things clearly: a clear audience, a clear promise, a clear process, and a clear price. When those 4 things are aligned, higher pricing starts to feel natural. When positioning is vague, every price feels expensive. So if your website sounds like every other photographer or videographer, if your Instagram bio says the same thing as everyone else, and if your packages are built around hours instead of outcomes, the market has no reason to value you differently, and price becomes the only comparison point. So how do you escape the underpricing trap? It's not by randomly doubling your prices overnight. You fix the structure. First, raise your brand positioning before raising your price. Define the type of weddings that you specialize in. Define the type of couple that you serve. Define the experience that you provide. Second, strengthen your sales process. Most photographers and videographers lose sales not because of price, but because of uncertainty during consultations. Confidence increases perceived value. And third, sell experiences instead of time. Stop selling hours of coverage, start selling the experience of the wedding day and the legacy of the images. Fourth, increase your prices incrementally. Move from 3K to 4K, then 4 to 5, then 5 to 6. Each step improves your margins. And finally, just reduce your volume. The goal isn't more weddings. The goal is fewer weddings at higher value. Underpricing is rarely a talent problem. It's almost always a design problem. When your positioning is strong, your sales process is confident, and your brand communicates value clearly, higher pricing becomes sustainable because you're not selling photos or videos. You're selling the only permanent memory of a once-in-a-lifetime day. And that's not something that should be priced like an accessory. So hopefully you learned something in this video. If you did, hit the subscribe button and you'll see more videos on how you can grow your wedding business. You can also follow me on Instagram at Aidin Tyler. And if you want help rebuilding your positioning, increasing your close rate, and installing a structure that supports higher prices without panic, go to howtosellweddings.com and watch the free training. Because you're not just selling photos or videos, you're selling the only thing that lasts. Price it like it matters. I'll see you in the next one.